Hi, I'm Brady Riggs, Senior Instruction Editor for Golf Tips Magazine. You know, I teach a lot of different players, from the Tour Pro to the average Joe who's out there on the weekends. And what I see is different types of swings work for different types of people. You know, we'd all like to swing like Tiger Woods or Anthony Kim and really be dynamic and athletic, but some of us, as we get further on in our golf careers, just can't make that move anymore, and we need to do some things differently. The average player, the Joe out there, he's got to make some adjustments for a lack of flexibility and a lack of strength that we don't see with the young tour player out there. So here's what we'd like to do, and we'd start in the setup position. Setup position, if you're really flexible, you can get your feet to be kind of straight on or perpendicular to the target line. If you're not flexible, you want to get those toes opened up a little bit because that'll help your hips rotate on the backswing. Most amateurs really struggle getting the club to come down from the inside on the downswing. So what you want to do is set your setup position up so that it helps you come down on the proper path. At setup, if you're an average player, get your right shoulder to drop back a little bit. That's a good idea. Put that ball back in your stance also. That'll help you come from the inside. If you're flexible and you're really able to move athletically, you don't have to make those adjustments. You can start out in a little more neutral position. But if you're not, make those subtle changes to your setup. That'll really help. On the backswing, we want you to be able to kind of set up that inside path on the downswing right away. So again, if you're struggling with your flexibility, don't be afraid to let your hips rotate right away during the backswing. That'll get that club tracking back a little bit deeper behind you and make it easier to come down from the inside as you approach impact. If you're more flexible, you don't have to turn as much in the beginning. You can add a little lateral motion, which would look like this from this side, just a little bit of lateral. That really helps start out a kind of dynamic chain of events that will create a lot of speed in your swing. After you've done that little bit of takeaway, it's okay if you're not really flexible to go ahead and let that right leg straighten out a little bit. That'll help the hands and the club get a little further behind you again at the top. Another good idea to create a more inside path on the downswing. If you're flexible, don't worry about it. You can keep that knee a little more flexed as you work back, and it'll restrict your hip turn and kind of get the club working up on a little more neutral angle, and it'll help the shaft line up at the top. As you come down, the more flexible players, the more dynamic move that we'd love to create if you can, we want to change directions a little sharper. What that means is that just before I finish the top of my swing, I want to go ahead and be moving back towards the target. That'll make that shaft load up and get all torqued out like you see with Sergio and other young players, and it creates a lot of speed, but it requires a lot of athletic ability. You've got to be able to go two directions as the swing starts. If you're not flexible and you're not super dynamic, don't make that transitional move. That'll screw you up pretty bad. It'll probably make the club come over the top. Instead, go ahead and finish the turn going back and start down with a nice subtle move of the weight moving again towards the target. That'll help the club drop down to the inside. At impact, you're going to see a couple little differences between the tour player, the real dynamic move, and what maybe you can do if you're not super flexible. The tour player, the really dynamic move, we see that left leg can straighten out at impact as the chest stays down on top of the ball. That really creates a lot of compression for contact and really makes the iron shot super crisp. But if you're not really flexible, then that left knee isn't going to get so posted up or straight through impact, and you'll probably see it stay a little bit flexed. From the other side, what we'll see is that with a really flexible player, the dynamic move, we see a big difference between the amount of hip rotation and shoulder rotation at contact. So the tour player, you might see a lot of hip rotation with the shoulders still pretty square to the line. If you're not super flexible, that's not going to work for you, so don't try to get so much hip turn through the ball. Go ahead and let the club come from the inside, and your hips will open subtly, but they shouldn't be so dramatic, and it would look more like that coming into impact. So watch that at impact, because that's one of those spots where people really try to get a lot of hip turn and it totally screws them up, so avoid that if you can. Release. Here's the next part. If you're turning a lot through impact, like a tour player, a real flexible player, then you wouldn't see the club pass you too much. In other words, as I'm coming in, I don't want the club to flip by me too much if I'm really getting open. So the hands and the club will look a little more subtle as I come through. Everything sort of stays together. But if I haven't rotated so much, then the arms and the club are going to pass my body a little bit more coming through if I'm not as flexible. That's a good thing to try to do, especially if you struggle hitting a slice, is to try and let the club pass your body through impact. It helps the face square up and improves your distance too. Last thing when we get to the finish. And this is one of those things I've got to cheat on because I'm not that flexible. But what we see with really flexible, young, dynamic swings is that the club tends to wrap around them a ton in the follow-through position. From this side, we'd actually see the club go all the way around at the end and point towards the target. Like I said, to do that, I've got to kind of cheat because that's not easy for me. What most guys can do is actually not try to rotate so far, just go ahead and let it finish wherever it is. For me, that's somewhere about here, and that'll work just fine, and you won't kill yourself trying to get into a Annika finish position or a finish like Tiger Woods. So as you go through your swing, you can try and adopt some of the things that we see out of the really young dynamic players, but you got to be careful. If you don't have the flexibility, the strength, and you never really were a great athlete, then I would avoid those things and go into the more subtle moves that will really help your ball striking but won't be too hard on your body. Good luck.